So my girl was like, I have a friend and he's starting this, I think he just started this rap magazine. I don't know, girl. I know him from high school. And long story short, she tells me about what would be the source.
Great.
Call him. His name is Dave Mays. Just call him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did she say he's a white boy?
Yes.
Okay.
She says he's a white boy. And I was like, it's hip hop? He's a white boy?
Huh?
It's a
Because that
magazine?
didn't exist
I said,
back
girl,
then.
wait, it's a magazine?
Right.
Like pages?
Right.
Give me his number.
Right.
So I get to New York. I come home. I go to meet Dave. He's Dave. They're not looking for editors, by the way.
Right.
He's like, I need an assistant. You
Right.
could get my Pepsi.
Right. What was your first impression of Dave? Like because
I was confused. I didn't reconcile white and hip hop at
Right.
that time. So all of that was very confusing
Right,
for me.
right.
And then when you add Jewish and Harvard and the other factors, I really was a little thrown off. But in actually interacting with him, I felt a certain level of kind of hip hop authenticity. What I would grow to learn in that following year about the currency of hip hop and how it grabs souls and how it snatches you up, and it's not race specific in that way.
the tentacles of hip hop
Yeah.
are not discriminatory.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. So over the next year, I would come to understand that in a very aggressive and quick way,
Right.
because the source was filled with white boys
Right.
from time to time.
Right.
You know,
What year was this?
this is 91.
Okay, so this is already after they had transitioned from a newsletter.
They're no longer a newsletter, but it may have been like the second national issue,
Okay.
maybe third. It's still very early on.
Who was on the cover when you first got there?
When I walked in, I think I remember that.
Or let's say when you walked in, what was the following cover that you were affiliated with?
Oh gosh,
I know. It's a tough one.
was it Latifah
I remember that cover.
with the colorful like
Uh-huh,
brown?
uh-huh.
It might-
Kente Crown.
Yeah, it might have been Latifah.
Right.
It might have been Latifah.
What was the environment of the source back
Oh
then?
goodness. So we're pre the real world. Like, so we're the first real world before the real world happens, really, because you're talking about a intersectional kind of space in that there are multiple boys and girls, white and black, Hampton and Harvard. I mean, there are many like poles that are coming together in this space, and we're really talking it out. We're debating it out. That whole Source Mind Squad thing, that comes from a very real space.
Right.
We were theorists
Right.
before we were anything else.
So when you get there, you realize, oh shit, I didn't get to essence, but this is where I need to be.
What? In 2 days.
2 days.
I was, and so,
You knew it was magic.
in 2 days.
Right.
In 2 days.
Who was there when you got there? Tell us who was on the Mind Squad back then.
Tulo, Rob.
Rob Tulo. Who's now at Apple Beats from Shady.
Beats, right. And so, Maddie C.
Maddie C. What up, Maddie?
What up, Maddie C. Wilder, Chris Wilder.
Chris Wilder.
All my boys.
Like who else? Like who else?
James Bernard.
James Bernard.
Jonathan Schechter.
John Schechter.
The legendary Dream Hampton.
Dream Hampton. Was Bones around?
Bones was around. So Bones was never well, I can't say never because I don't know what happened after I left, but he wasn't a staffer. So the source was a family. You asked what we were kind of energetically.
Right.
Because we were pre-real world, it was just a hub. So there were some of us who were on staff, but there were more people who were part of the Mind Squad
Right.
who weren't on staff
Right.
than those of us who were. And
Right.
Bones is certainly one of those.
Right. From the outside looking in, it seems like the makeup of the staffers at the source was really diverse.
It was.
And when I look
It was
back,
accidental, I would say.
really, it wasn't intentional. It was organic.
James, Dave, and Jonathan stated, I don't know what their stated purpose
Right.
was when they came together.
Right.
And how this kind of unfolded, in the 2 years before I get to this teeny tiny office downtown in Soho at the source. But I know that what happened, the experiment becomes very organic. And what happens in those first 2, 3, 4 years is legendary purely because it's organic.
Right.
It's happening in real time
Right.
every single day. No day is like the day before.
Right. So you guys would argue about authenticity
Mm-hmm.
and what hip hop really meant.
Mm-hmm.
And if this, even though they're rapping and there's beats, this is not really hip hop. Like, you guys really argued about.
Oh yeah.
What's some of your memories? What arguments did you have? Like, if you can tell me an argument.
Well, one thing that stands out to me, and that was kind of revolutionary for me in terms of my thinking, was the dissection of politics as it relates to hip hop. Like, so understanding hip hop as a culture was not something that I was speaking before I got to the source. It was something that I was living.
Something that you did.
Something that I did.
Something that you were
before I
a
got to the source.
product of.
Exactly.
Right.
So when I understood that we could kind of theoretically unpack this, and again, that's just happening because of theory. So does TLC deserve to be on the cover of the source?
Mm-hmm.
So you're the girl now, so Dream's gone, so I'm the girl, quote unquote, right? And so the question is,
Mm-hmm.
in those early days when hip hop is beginning to be exported, what is authentic?
Right.
What remains, so we're coming out of, like, we're still backpackers for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Still very New York centric, kind of, everybody is measuring people's, like, realness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we were really speaking of it in those terms, but we were.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, we
That
were.
nigga
Yeah, we
ain't
were.
real.
Yeah, we were.
That shit
Yeah,
ain't
we were.
real.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep it real, son.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was I saying?
Just in terms of, like, what early arguments, like TLC.
Okay. Yeah. So that was a big thing. So when I did the first cover of TLC in their life, I was 22, maybe,
Right.
and they were 22.
Right.
And we were all the same age. And I go down to Atlanta to cover their first album, and there's a real question mark as to whether or not this is hip hop.
And you're in Atlanta. Hip hop is not in Atlanta.
Exactly. So
right.
they are breaching every rule that hip hop had.
Right. Every convention.
Right.
Because back then we were all rap conservatives.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right.
And there was no latitude. Either you fit in the box or you did not, and therefore you were not.
Right.
But what was burgeoning in me, and what Dream and I had begun to really work out the kinks of in those early source days, was hip-hop feminism. What it looks like in
Right.
practice, in action. How necessary it is for us to embrace every female moment happening in these hip-hop streets in the early 90s, late 80s. It's important for us to recognize one another and tell one another's stories, whether or not the boys co-sign or not. So this was my very daring attempt to bring something very, very new and different to the pages of the source, and I was completely trampled for it.
Really?
It was, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. What was your relationship like with Dream? Because you talk about it's a very formative time, because that's when hip hop went from this very pure, not necessarily idyllic, but it went from this pure kind of music art form, and then you start hearing we get introduced to, like, gangster rap, and then we start really seeing the misogynistic aspects of hip hop at the time. What was your relationship like with Dream within the bullpen of this majority male staff at the source, and then with the the emergence of, like, misogyny in hip hop?
I would argue it was always there, but
Right.
that it wasn't as brutal.
Yes.
And at the level that it would grow into. Well, wow, that's a great question. I guess the first thing I remember is that she received me.
Mm-hmm.
So we call ourselves bald-headed.
Mm-hmm.
We were both like, I had a Caesar and she had a Caesar.
Right.
So when I walk in and she's got a Caesar and I've got a Caesar, then they're immediately either we're fucking with each other or we're not. It's only those
Right.
two things.
Right.
And she immediately kind of embraced me, like literally, physically embraced me, and then just metaphorically embraced me in every way. And she was looking for an ally
Right.
without even knowing it. Just being there meant making sometimes single arguments that other people didn't share. And so Dream's early work was very formative for me.
So she was like a mentor in a sense. Early mentor.
She was, I wouldn't define it as a mentor, but I would say, because we were age peers, so you don't really look at someone who's
Right.
the exact same age as you in a mentor, kind of way, but I felt her freedom. And I felt her freedom in a hip-hop context. And I was instructed by her feminism, absolutely. And so we both shared a massive love of people. We were just very, very hardcore black people lovers. And we absolutely had that in common. And we were both girls, just walking in the door.
Right.
So, I'm never that girl who's like, I don't mess with chicks because blah, blah, blah,
Right,
blah, blah.
right.
So I've never been that. She's never been that. So when we met, there was some magic that just kind of happened, in part because that was meant, in part because there was a necessity there,
Right.
at the walls of the source, and within the walls of the source.
What were the discussions like with regard to like and giving an album 5 mics? Was there and let me rephrase that, or let me add to that. Was there an internal no 5 mics policy?
Yes.
Let's
Pretty much.
explain that. Wait, hold on. Internet.
Yeah, please.
Internet.
Context.
Where y'all at? Help me out, somebody.
Millennial, listen, y'all don't understand. Let me give you the context.
Help him.
So in 1991, the Source magazine was the Bible. You hear that, but I got to tell you this again. It was the Bible. It was the only publication that really addressed hip hop in a very clear, and like we said, real. It was authentic, right? You know, like how we talk about whether shit is real. That shit was real.
Well, not only like there was nothing else.
There was nothing like it.
It wasn't like
It wasn't like a teeny bopper.
No, right. So other
fanzine.
than right. So beyond, like, right on in that generation
Right.
of rag mags.
Right.
This was a serious publication.
It was intellectual.
This was absolutely
intellectual,
Yes.
fly.
Yeah.
Like dope. It was
Yes.
dope. I can't even. The shit was dope.
Yeah.
And the 5 mic ratings, y'all motherfuckers don't care about that shit right now. But the 5 mics ratings made you a rap god.
It's crazy in hindsight to think about how important that was at the time. But what it symbolized was how important it was to the hip hop community to be validated by people who respected the craft, understood the language, and loved the people. And when I say the people, I don't mean just black people at large now. I mean hip hop kids.
The audience.
Because
the culture.
the generation before us was rejecting us
Right.
left and right.
Yes.
There was no place to go.
Oh, it was war between
It was
R&B
war
niggas.
between what?
R&B and hip hop.
It was a war between our parents and us.
Right.
It was a war between the civil rights movement and the hip hop movement. It was a war between generations that doesn't exist now.
Right.
Where was Combat Jack when we needed him in '91?
Right. 'Cause
There wasn't. So how you can instruct these millennials? Those guys didn't exist for
Right.
us.
So the arguments behind the 5 mics, like, what do you remember any, like, this gotta get a 5 mic, or like, fuck that, that's not a 5 mic album? And how does a non-5 mic policy work?
Well, it wasn't stated. It
Right.
just was. It just because our bar was so high.
Right.
It just, I think for a lot of us, it was pretty unfathomable that somebody would drop
A 5
a
mic.
5 mic. So
Okay.
we came into the room more or less feeling like this is a unrealistic goal.
We're gonna find flaws.
We're not just gonna find flaws. We know they're there.
Right.
And we're so sophisticated in our hip hop analysis that we're going to see them and therefore not be able to crown you.
Right.
So it wasn't so much that we sat in the hub and was like, no one will ever get a 5. It's just that,
Y'all cared so much about the culture
yeah,
that y'all were not handing out 5s.
yeah.
Listen, I always say this, and this might be a confession. So, I was brand new in the game. I worked 2 blocks away
I
at
remember you
Def
guys.
Jam.
I remember.
And, I was grappling internally with whether, even though Def Jam at the time was the best place for me to be, I didn't know that I was grappling with whether I was going to be an attorney, like whether
You was
being an
struggling,
attorney
yeah.
was my calling or not. And I remember Kimson from, formerly of Fan Bros, was like, yo, the Source is up the block. And I remember walking in the office one time, my first time, and you guys were superheroes to me. Like,
Was this, had the wall come, like, where you,
I don't remember the
Okay,
specifics
just
as much as you guys, like, were my intellectual peers
yeah,
that were out here on a major platform
Yeah.
discussing the art form that I love. And I wasn't jealous. I was like envious.
Yeah.
Like I was like, how can I be down? So it was you, it was Dream, it was Chris Wild, it was the names that you mentioned, and I was just like, yo, that's when the seed was planted in me. Like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be them cats.
And you were, but because there weren't there are multiple outlets today for
Right.
you to find your tribe. Back then, you couldn't go to the internet
Right.
to find your tribe.
Right.
You had to literally pound the pavement to find your tribe.
Right.
And so when you saw us, you knew that you were us.
Yo, y'all niggas,
So
y'all niggas was as
Yeah.
spectacular as my favorite rappers.
Yeah.
And as much as I love being a Def Jam, if y'all had given me an offer, I would have been down with the Source from day.
That's what happened to all the
fucking
smart kids.
one.
So all the smart kids in hip hop
Right.
were like, I'll shoot myself right now if I don't get a job at the Source. I
Right.
swear to God.
And it was kind of lonely because
yes.
I was lonely because
Yes.
I felt like I you know, no shots to Def Jam. Def Jam really was my footprint into it was the open door, it was my foot in the door. It helped define me. But
And me too.
But
Yeah.
the Source, like internet, y'all don't understand how everyone behind those pens
I just
were
wish we had
superheroes.
cameras.
Right, I know.
So much of that was just so